vampires, demonic possessions, Walking Dead, undead, ghosts. Who you gonna call? Hello! Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It's Jose here, welcoming you to another episode of Amazing Worlds, where today I am not going to be reviewing 1, 2, or even 3 books. I am going to be reviewing a figure in literature that I am very fond of, I am very endeared to, and is the figure of the Paranormal Investigator. Yes, indeed. We're talking about, fighting vampires, fighting werewolves, fighting demons, fighting all sorts of undead, paranormal, otherworldly stuff. And I am going to review a little bit the figure of the Paranormal Investigator in the history of literature and share with you some of the books on the subject that I've enjoyed and maybe not so much enjoyed over the years. So, the figure of the Paranormal Investigator is just the natural evolution from Sherlock Holmes. A lot of these paranormal investigators, fighters of the nether worlds, are very much influenced by Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes, and is just the natural next step. Once you've investigated cases in the real world, well, what about the unreal world? So, the first paranormal investigator that we encounter in literature is that of Professor Martin Hesselius. Indeed, Professor Martin Hesselius, created by Irish author Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu in his book In a Glass Darkly. Now, one thing I have to mention is that actually this is a bit of a creation by accident. The figure of Martin Hesselius, medical doctor, medical philosopher, came across by accident actually, because a lot of the stories contained in A Glass Darkly had already been published in short story format beforehand, and when they were compiled for the book edition, a linking figure, a connective thread had to be devised, and Professor Hesselius was the figure for that. So actually he's a very primordial paranormal investigator. He doesn't really intervene much in the stories and eventually sort of fades away in the book, particularly in the last story of this book, which is Carmilla, which is actually the first ever vampire story. So Carmilla predates Bram Stoker's Dracula. The first vampire story, if you want to read it, is in here. And it's a bit of a peculiar story because actually there's a bit of a sort of lesbian attraction thing between the vampire and the prey. But don't get too excited, because this was written in 1872 and you really couldn't get too frisky at the time with that sort of thing. But if you're interested to explore the seeds, the germs of the Paranormal Investigator in A Glass Darkly by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu, is certainly the place to start. You heard it first here. Moving on in time, next we have. I'm going to sidestep. I'm going to skip over Bram Stoker's Dracula and the figure of Van Helsing. He is a paranormal investigator. He's got a much more active role in defeating Dracula than Professor Hesselius, but it's a one-off story, and I am looking for continuity, multiple stories. But Van Helsing could be included there. I don't want people to get too angry, too upset because I haven't included him there. I also want to give credit where it's due. If you want to read a little bit more about the figure of Professor Hesselius and how he comes across in the stories, I strongly recommend the essay by Rhonda Knight, which I will leave a link in the description below. I've read it to inform myself when making this video, and I don't want to steal anything from anyone, and I want to credit my sources. Our next paranormal investigator in time would be that in the figure of John Silence, created by Algernon Blackwood. Only 6 stories were written, collected here in this book that I've got. These aren't great, actually, in my opinion. They're not fantastic. And the reason I think that they're not fantastic is because there aren't any real sort of physical manifestation of otherworld entities as such. So there are cases of sort of possession of the mind, and John Silence, physician extraordinaire, all he does is some sort of high-powered sort of therapy, like sort of speaking therapy, intervention, Freudian type thing, and deals with the demonic possessions like that. And there's not a lot of action happening, and there is not a lot of real facing, battling demons or anything like that. So I think Blackwood's John Silence, I mean, it's there. It is filling in the gap. It's moving us forward a little bit, but it isn't great. Next, and I'm very fond of this, is actually the casebook of Karnaki, the Ghost Finder by W.H. Hodgson. This is really nice. This is proper paranormal investigator now. Now we've got it in fully fleshed out form. Hodgson unfortunately died in World War One. Unlike Tolkien was lucky enough to come back. Hodgson died there. Imagine if their roles had been swapped, what would have happened? But here, massive Sherlock Holmes influence. Sherlock Holmes lives in 232B Baker Street. I think I got the address right, and therefore Karnaki lives in 472 Cheyne Walk. Every story is a little bit formulaic. It begins in the same fashion. So Karnaki gathers together his friends and rounds to relate the story of his latest investigation, which to me detracts a little bit from the tension of the drama of the story, because you know that if he's telling the story, everything went, he survived, everything was hunky-dory. But what is interesting about the stories in the book is that sometimes there is no real ghost. There is no ghost. It's just a big kind of Scooby-Doo type thing. So it was actually a human intervention there. It's not silly at all like Scooby-Doo, but you get the idea, right? Whereas in some of the cases, there is a real otherworldly ectoplasmic entity at play. And I think the stories get better and better, and definitely the last one, called The Hog, is the one that truly did scare me and left me with a really good sweet, sour taste in my mouth. It was great. I remember I was, at the time when I read it, I was running a Call of Cthulhu game in the London Dungeons and Dragons club. So we used to meet at a pub in London and spend all our Saturdays playing games. And I started running Call of Cthulhu, and one of my players decided to have a go at running a scenario, an adventure, and he actually used one of the Karnaki stories for our game. And strangely enough, we solved the case in the same way that Professor Karnaki does in the story. So that was quite nice, and that's how I was introduced to the character. The influence of Karnaki cannot be understated, particularly in other authors such as H.P. Lovecraft, who in his essay on the supernatural horror in literature directly addresses Hodgson as a color influence, a source. So Karnaki starts to use spells in a manner of speaking. So he talks about the Sama ritual, Sama with like triple A's everywhere, and he also uses the electric pentacle to fight these entities and stuff like that. So as you can see, we've moved on from the almost psychotherapy, psychiatric treatment of John Silence to the much more where we know and recognize now as a paranormal investigator, using spells, using artifacts, and that sort of stuff. Our next character in my somewhat fussy timeline is that of Solomon Kane, created by Robert E. Howard, much more known for his Conan the Barbarian series, and also contributor to the Cthulhu mythos. These are silly. These are pretty silly. I did not enjoy this. Pretty pulpy. You can imagine this being written just for entertainment value in those magazines of the 20s and 30s. Solomon Kane is meant to be this Puritan, England Puritan rapier, dagger, kind of a bit like V for Vendetta type character, costume thing, fighting werewolves and stuff like that around the time. But at some point in his adventures, he travels to Africa and meets this juju wizard, mystical black man. Not my term. I think that the mystical Negro figure was coined by Spike Lee, the director. But yeah, he meets a mystical Negro called Enlonga, and he gives him magic stuff just because type thing. So not great, not a great depiction of African people, and a little bit insensitive. And the stories aren't that fascinating or that engaging. It's a little bit silly, and probably, I would say, out of all the ones I've reviewed so far, it would be at the bottom of my list. But there you have it. If you want to complete your set of Paranormal Investigators, then you certainly need to have Solomon Kane in your list. And I believe there was a movie made about it. I'll list a link or something. Following on from there, and naturally, obviously, check out my video on his first two books, but the Dresden Files, Harvey Dresden, had to be mentioned, isn't it? Harvey Dresden, very much taking on from Carnacki. So he's actually a wizard. So Carnacki was just a doctor. They used magical items. Dresden is actually a wizard that uses all sorts of magical items, potions, spells, all sorts of things to fight werewolves, vampires, lycanthropes. I've only read the first two books. I've got the third one there for later. Long series, so I'm assuming it's fairly successful. Mixing very well elements of black crime, noir, black and noir, just saying the same thing in different languages. Elements of the mystery crime novels of the 30s with paranormal stuff. So pretty decent for a good joyride. Yeah, I would actually recommend it. I would recommend, if you want to dip your toes, grab the first couple of novels. You couldn't do much wrong. However, for me, the most accomplished paranormal investigator, demonic fighter of all the characters that I have reviewed is John Constantine, Hellblazer, created by Alan Moore. First appeared in the Swamp Thing saga, so check out my video review on the saga of the Swamp Thing if you haven't done so. But this is just fantastic. It's got it all. Super long series. It run for 300 issues. There's probably going to be about 30 of these volumes here. I'm progressively working my way through it, and you've got it all: angels, demons, ghost possessions, all sorts of really crazy stuff. A vast array of hugely talented writers that took turns at the character. Fantastic artists as well throughout. Really dark stuff. Sometimes very socially critical as well. It's a super accomplished, very well written, very well crafted, very well drawn, very well created supernatural investigator, and probably top of my list for sure. Hellblazer. Here, this is volume 18, signed by Irving Fraser, Mike Carey, and John McCree. Just for me. So just wanted to show it in the video. Finally, hugely influenced by Professor Carnacki, it is my very own Professor Aljala. So this is my book of supernatural entity fighter, paranormal investigator, is a collection of stories set in my hometown in Spain, hence the sort of heavy Arabic influences there. Unfortunately for you, you don't get to read them. A, because they're written in Spanish, and B, because it remains unpublished. But yeah, before kids, I used to have time to do things, and yeah, I don't know, maybe someday I'll find time to translate them into English and just give them away for free. I don't know. Or maybe someday I will get a publishing deal or something like that. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope that if you are intrigued by this figure in literature, you pick up one of those. Possibly, just to round things up, I'm going to rank them. I am going to rank my paranormal investigators, because it'll be a nice fitting ending to the video. So, for creativity, for being the forefather of this, I have to say, I'm a sucker for tradition and the oldies, so I'm going to say Professor Karnaki goes to number 1. Secondly, Hellblazer, absolutely, for sure. Number 3, I would say Harvey Dresden. Number 4, Martin Hesselius. Number 5 and number 6 are interchangeable. Solomon Kane, John Silence. There you go. That is my video. Thank you ever so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, let me know what you think. Apologies again for the lighting. I've realized what the mistake is, but I'm not entirely sure I can fix it yet, because I don't have a light coming from over there. All the lights are over here or to the left. I am waiting for my desk to arrive. Once I have it ready, I will try to make things better. But anyway, I really appreciate the new subscriptions. I'm up to 50. I know I made a promise, and I'm hoping to make it to 100. At 100 milestone, I will do something else. I know what I'm going to do. When we reach 100 people, and I know we will reach 100, I don't know when, but we will, I will do my bookshelf tour, so both sides, and by then I'm hoping to have brought everything back from my parents and give you the full thing, everything that I've got. Once again, thank you for watching. Take lots of care, and I'll see you next time. Bye.